That makes me happier than you can possibly imagine.
So, my lovelies, here we are, Thursdays at 11 a.m. as QT Conversations. It's an opportunity for the qualified tutor community to push our thinking forward on various topics in tutoring. And sometimes we get really specific about how we do things, and sometimes we sort of take a macro view. But it tends to be a ramble that ends up being quite transformational. Because when do we get a chance to just talk about the important things in what we do? Certainly not with our friends and family because they are totally baffled by tutoring. I said to somebody yesterday, I work in tutoring, and the blank look was just astonishing. So part of it is just scratching that itch for ourselves. But what I really find is that there's insights that come out of these conversations that don't come out otherwise, and that those impact our practice. So I created a bit of a routine for these conversations over the year. There's a bit of a curriculum and there's a bit of a pattern. And the way that that aligns today is that the conversation, broadly speaking, is about educating online. But very specifically, what I want to do today is celebrate. I want a conversation that is about celebrating our success. So, to put those things together, what I'd like you to tell me about today and be as specific as possible. In my house, we say Pacific, but sometimes I forget that's wrong. We do it on purpose, but sometimes I... So, be as specific as possible. I want you to tell me how tutoring online has changed your life and the lives of your students. And I'll give you a personal, for instance, to get you started. My 12-year-old is not at school at the moment. He's not at school at the moment, and he won't be returning for the foreseeable because he did something stupid and dangerous. And I love him, and I very, very much want to smack him at the moment. So there have been, I know Emma's rolling her eyes, there have been some very difficult conversations in my home. But the best thing that has happened was I was able to pick up four tutors who I know very, very well inside the QT community and set them up immediately to provide a full timetable for my 12-year-old son. Now, the advantage of him being in year 8 is they get to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about in each of those subjects. So there's a maths tutor, an English tutor, a science tutor, and a history tutor, and he just gets to nerd out on each of those subjects. I didn't have to pay the £75 an hour that is usual in my local area. I got to pay a much more manageable price for me and a very fair price for the tutors. I didn't have to wait until somebody had a gap in their schedule because I was able to work inside school hours, unfortunately. But and I was able to contact a tutor from anywhere in the UK or beyond. So that massive pool of opportunity meant that I was able to pivot really quickly and provide something for my young person that potentially will be transformational and exactly what he needed. It was one of those moments where I was like, I think I need an online school. And then I was like, I think I could make an online school. And that's what we did. And that's a real personal success that's happened to us this week. And I'd love to hear from you. Rosanna, can I call on you first?
Yeah, of course.
Great.
Similar to you about the kind of geographical reach and how that's not an issue when you're doing online. So before COVID, I'm sure this is the case for a lot of tutors, I was tutoring in person, and having had COVID happen, as horrible as it was, it made me realize how impractical that was compared to the reach that you can get online. I wasn't working internationally before COVID. I wasn't teaching students in China and other countries like the US. Obviously, that would be practically impossible if you were not doing that online. So it allowed me to kind of, reach out and get more international students who had different needs. And that was more challenging for me. So that I think encouraged more professional development that would have been otherwise available to me had I just stayed in the UK. It wasn't really practical for me to move to another country as well. So online is like the best of both worlds from that point of view. And then I think on the client side, again, similar to what you were saying about your kids as well, like you're not limited by tutors that are immediately available to you in your local area. And also, to be honest, like before I was working locally as well, and even that's a little bit impractical because,
Go
you
on.
know, well, now I tutor back to back, which is great for me. I might have a lesson, you know, like sort of like one after the other. And that's really nice for me because that means that, you know, I can get like more work in and I'm not having to travel between jobs. So even if I was working locally, I wouldn't be able to do that, if that makes sense. So yeah, for me, it's been a game changer. I know for other tutors, they like to work in person still, and that's fine. And, you know, each to their own, and there's no kind of one size fits all. But for me, online has been brilliant, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's also blends, you know, Jenna, who hopefully will pop in soon, talks about a blend where once a month she insists on meeting her students in person, and she feels that that accelerates the impact of the online, which is so interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I'd love to add to that because recently I was lucky enough to meet a student of mine who actually lives in Vietnam, but she successfully entered an essay competition, got shortlisted, got invited to an awards ceremony, came to London for the very first time in her life with her mum, and I got to meet the pair of them in person, which was so nice. So having that kind of mixture, yeah, is really nice.
As you say that, I'm thinking another tutor mentioned that to me recently, and then I realised who it was. Go on, Dee.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lovely best of both worlds. I've currently got, I think it's 3 students who come to my house. One of whom's at the very local school, 2 a bit further away. One is at the school where I did teach for 2 years, 20 odd years ago, and is being taught by teachers. One was the head of department when I was there, one was a classroom teacher when I was there. So I've got that lovely blend. And I've got a number of students in the Middle East, which fill my afternoon slot. So I've got that being able to work internationally and maximize what I'm doing is fantastic. And a number of those students I've been working with since partway through year 7 and they're now into year 10. So the relationship I have is well, it blesses me on a regular basis, which is fantastic. And because they're expats, most of them are actually coming to the UK during the holidays. And it is an aim of mine to hopefully at some point be able to meet up with them, because when they come to the UK, they're not that far away. So at some point before our journey together ends, I would love to be able to meet up with them. Yeah, but I've had an interesting journey in that I took redundancy before lockdown had even just before lockdown started. Cut my teeth for a month in Zoom teaching students I knew well, and then had to slowly decide, well, what do I do next? How do I build up my business? And it's been a bit of a flail in the dark to start off with, and then I found QT, and life got so much better after that.
So that flail in the dark is really interesting about online tutoring, because we all went through that, didn't we? But the fact that we're still here online, and the fact that we found strategies such as community to help ourselves, becomes really interesting in terms of that transformation, because, you know, we just had a co-working session from 10 till 11, and that was 5 people from lots of different places in the country, pretty much doing a very similar thing. Yeah, you were all planning or working on business needs, but we were all connected, but at a distance. And I think that there's something about we're doing some construction work in our house at the moment, and I've been researching. My house is quite open plan, and I've been researching whether people are still building open plan spaces. And the thinking is that since COVID, since we started working from home, there's more of an appreciation of rooms with walls and doors, which is such a funny outcome. But, you know, the first few days on Zoom, I couldn't find a white wall to sit in front of, you know? So there are all these different sort of layers and elements to it. I'm going to bring in another theme. Margaret Mary, you and I have spoken about health needs that might limit our ability to be out and about, to drive to students' houses or to work in the classroom. Would you mind touching on that for us, please?
Not at all. I mean, although I planned to leave the classroom and go into online tutoring, kind of before I got sick, I got ME in between the time that I'd handed in my resignation and left. So by the time I left, I was really quite poorly, which was a really scary, scary time for me. But I know I wouldn't last 3 days in school now. I wouldn't. I'd be collapsing in an exhausted heap before the week was out. But what this does, I mean, okay, yeah, I've got ill health pension, which isn't enough. If I'm honest, it would be really possible, but really difficult to live on that. But effectively, what I'm able to do by tutoring online, one, I don't have, as you're talking about, the aggravation of driving anywhere, because that's just exhausting. And I had a couple of parents asking for tuition in their home, and I've just gone, I tutor face to face if they can come to me. So I have a slidey out desk. So I have a couple who do come to me at home, but the online means that I have a sustainable job. Which again, I'm in some online ME communities, and when I hear people's stories, I think, God, I'm so lucky. I am actually able to work. I mean, here, I'm still in my pajamas, right? Mornings are rough. I'm still in my pajamas and I'm doing this from the sofa. And I have a mock-up. So I have my other screen and my mouse over here, and I can tutor from the sofa online if I'm too tired to sit at the desk. Now, that probably sounds really strange,
Not at
but
all.
sometimes I'm so fatigued that just sitting upright, you don't know how much energy you use just sitting upright. So if I'm tired, I work from a sofa. If I'm not, I prefer to work from a desk because that's better for, my posture and things like that. And I can also, sometimes I work here in the morning. The evening I do my admin on the sofa. I tutor in the office when I can. I don't travel around. I can limit. I can limit. I can just limit what I do.
Yeah.
I don't tutor back to back. I leave half an hour in between one student and another student. And it's having that control, also because I'm self-employed, and I know that's kind of side related, but it means I have control
Yeah.
over what I do. So my aim is 3 students a day. I might do 4 because I can't fit them in somewhere else, but that's it. That's my limit, and that's usually spread out through the day, which sounds really weird because it sounds like, well, you're always thinking about I've got to do work, but it's not. I might have a chunk in the afternoon where I can rest, and just that online. I'm not thinking I have to get in the car and drive somewhere. I leave the house. I aim to leave the house twice a week because there was one point when I was ill, or when I am still, but when I was worse than this, I didn't leave the house for about 6 weeks, and this wasn't during lockdown. This was after lockdown, and I was getting to the point where I'd get to the door and go, I can't do this today. So I thought that's scary. Is that a mental health thing, or do you actually physically not able to leave today? So I do make the point of going out twice a week minimum, sometimes 3, but that's it. I'm not going out and about all the time. I can't travel to do face-to-face tutoring, and I did to begin with, but now I go, no, actually that's exhausting. Can't do that. That's too, because the whole thing of having to get it's going to sound really bad, but to get dressed, to get showered and dressed, and get in the car, get organised, get out, all of that is a whole lot of activity and unnecessary for me because it's draining. With this condition, whereas online I can put my computer on, and I mean I've got my pajamas on today because this is a friendly community, but I wouldn't sit in my pajamas in front of a student, but all I got to do is put a top on. I could sit in my pajama bottoms, put a proper top on, and they can't smell whether I've had a shower or not.
So one of the advantages of online tutoring is they can't smell you. Is that what we got to?
Yeah, basically. I do have a shower every day, but I have to structure when is a suitable time in the day. I'm not having to do that. I've got to get showered, dressed, and out by a particular time because sometimes I can't meet a time deadline. I can in terms of sitting on the sofa in front of the computer, but physically out and about, I can't always meet a time deadline, particularly not in the morning. Can't do that
Yeah.
in the morning. That's a real struggle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that for me, this is perfect. I know with my ill health pension and what I get into, I'm effectively earning a full-time teacher salary, and that's like I can live with that because I'm not having to work as hard and I'm not as stressed, and I
Good
can
for
look
you.
after my health needs. It's as
Good
good
for
as it
you.
gets, really, I think.
Absolutely gorgeous. Jenna, you're going to acclimatize quite quickly to this conversation. But Emma, I'm going to call on you first if you don't mind. I did drop you a note in the chat before I wanted to ask your permission. I know you didn't see. Just have a quick look what I asked you. Yeah, thank you. So just to recap what we've just been discussing. So Rosanna says, tutoring online has broadened her horizons, made tutoring more challenging, which was a really interesting thing. Also more efficient because you can tutor back to back, so you can physically earn more in your day. Dee is saying also it enabled her to pivot quickly out of the classroom, to grope around in the dark, metaphorically, finding her way in online tutoring, and then through the connection of our community has really become confident in it. Margaret Mary is saying, in addition to all of those things, when you're living with ME, if you don't have a job that you can be in control of from your sofa, it is unrealistic. And so I mean, that what really struck me was when you said that when you speak to ME communities and you're so grateful that you've got a job that works around your needs. That's absolutely brilliant. Emma, can we talk about your sort of journey into online tutoring? And I'm quite mindful as well. I've asked you to touch on mental health, but I'm quite mindful that you, again, you sort of exercised your control because you segued quite intentionally out of the classroom and into teaching. And you took a year or two over that, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was part-time in the classroom for 3 years while I was running my business. And it was a transition period. I think the online bit, I feel a little bit of a fraud. I don't actually do that much online anymore.
Ah,
Um, I
what does any more mean?
so from probably this September, I'm down to 2 online lessons a week.
And yet the tutors that you take on to work for Core Plus,
Yeah.
are they mostly in person, online?
We're about 50-50 now.
Okay.
So for me, I'll come back to the mental health bit in a minute, but for me and the business, the positive thing about online is it gives the students choice. And for us in our business, it is all about finding the right tuition for the student. So I'm really lucky that I can offer both. I can offer online and face to face, and I can give the students and the parents the choice. The online is easier on the parents because they haven't got to get their kids there and all of that stuff. But for some kids, it's not right. So I can offer the face to face as well.
Yeah,
And I
lovely.
think
And the
that's
second
the
half of
nice
this conversation is really going to be diving into how online tutoring suits some children and how it really transforms accessibility for some children. But let's just continue this. Let's continue to explore who we are as tutors and how online tutoring has helped us.
So for me, I still find online tutoring quite hard. I like being next to the student and having that connection, and I quite like Jenna's model of going and meeting them once a month and whatever. Like that, to me, that's really nice. It doesn't really work in the same way for us, but I can see why it works for Jenna and the students she's working with. For me, I couldn't do all online because my mental health wouldn't cope.
Interesting. Tell
Which
us
is
what that
why
means.
I need human interaction. So yesterday I had no meetings booked in, no tutoring booked in during the day, and I sat and worked at my husband's work because I couldn't be on my own for a whole day. And even when the meetings are online, I still sometimes get that. I still sometimes then have to leave the house, even if it's to just go and get a coffee. And I know I've got stuff in the kitchen, but I need to leave the house. And yeah, I think the the mental health bit is, again, it's the same flexibility as for the students. So we have the best of both worlds. We can do what we want to do, and it gives us the choice. And whether we choose online or not, there's power in choice.
So beautiful. So really what we're talking about is hybrid.
Yes.
And that takes us directly on to Jenna's approach.
For me, it's been a huge journey with so many changes to my entire life in every which way, good and bad. I am thoroughly neurospicy and like a lot of the young people I work with, neurospicy in the way that makes digital learning really challenging for me. Pre-COVID, I really, really struggled to do these calls. I would not have joined. I would not have spoken. I would not have had my camera on.
Well, we've cured you of all that, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that for me, initially, I was really, really reluctant to engage in any kind of online teaching. I did through need, and in some ways it meant that I had some work-life balance. I was finally able to do some of my household chores. I started doing the washing up in my lunch break, and things like that.
Sorry, wait, I'm not clear. Is this a good thing?
Yes and no. This one, I mean, it's balanced. It's got all ends of the spectrum. And
she's frozen on washing up. She's probably gone to wash up.
I found I got into the swing of it. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll wait for you. You're fine. It does sound like a term of endearment. And Dee has a phrase as well. What's yours?
I don't use neuro divergence or neurotypical. I talk about neuro majority and neuro minority.
Although around here, I think we know that the majority is definitely spicy. I love how Emma says, I can't be left alone for the day. Jenna, do you want to have another go?
She's gone.
Well, sometimes turning the camera off works, doesn't it? I do want to come back to her, but I might have to do it at the end because I want to push the conversation forward, because really what becomes really magic is when we talk about our students, and when we notice how online tutoring has changed their life. And I really want to focus initially on inclusion. So affordability, accessibility, the mental and physical health limitations of our students. That means that they would not be able to come and sit next to Dee or next to Emma in the room, and the logistical elements that mean that, you know, driving to Margaret Mary's house or getting on a plane to Rosanna's just means that this tutoring wouldn't happen and the impact that you've had wouldn't happen. Jenna, can you cope if we move on and come back to that point you were going to make afterwards? Thanks, love. So right now what we're talking about is changing students' lives through online tutoring. Anyone want to dive in? Go
on. Through another tutoring business, I worked with a student who'd been out of school because of severe anxiety. There was absolutely no way that she could be in a school environment. And she was year 11. I think I started working with her in the January for the summer exams. And I saw her, I think it was only once a week. And there were some days when I was having to change what I did very quickly. And often, I can remember a lesson when we started off doing a bit of maths. She was clearly getting quite stressed quite quickly. So we spent a good part of the remainder of the session talking about her art and my art. And that was fantastic. And I actually managed to get her to a place where she wanted to have a go at some maths by the end of the session. So being able to work with someone who couldn't be in a classroom environment, probably wouldn't have coped very well with in person, to be able to work with her. And to be honest with you, I think I learned more than she did, because it was another opportunity to work with someone who had, quite challenging needs. And I had to, in an environment which isn't always conducive to it, be ultra sensitive to her. And when her anxiety was getting to a level where I really did need to change the what we were going to be doing in that session. So it was, Rosanna made me think about it, going online, you're now met with all sorts of learning challenges. You have to learn how to do this stuff. And that CPD has been really, really interesting. And because of that experience, I'm now working much better with other students who have similar kind of challenges with anxiety and so forth.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? And I think we had a conversation a few weeks ago about reading those cues online, and how much nuance there is in this little box. I know that all my tells come flying out in this space, and when I'm dysregulated, you all can see it on my face, and that's really interesting. It's really interesting to reflect on. Rosanna, go for it.
Yeah, just to echo as well what Dee said, I think with students with anxiety, it can be really effective, because I've had examples. There was one particular student I was working with last year, and she had quite severe anxiety. And it got to a point where sometimes, literally the moment the session was going to start, like, she'd have to cancel and stuff like that. And again, if I'd gone in person, that would have been so much more difficult, because then I'd have to factor in travel time and everything. But sometimes it would just be a case of her having her camera off and me kind of talking her through things and taking it really easy. Sometimes, similar to what Dee said, we wouldn't even talk about the subject in question. We'd just talk about what her week was like at school and everything. And I just feel like that was so much more manageable for her. I think the idea of someone coming to your house can be a little bit intimidating sometimes for a child. So just being online, I think there's, especially young kids now, like, they're so used to the online world in a way that, some people who are a bit older might not be, because they're online all the time on their phones and everything. So just sitting there on a Zoom session on their phone can feel a bit more manageable. Obviously there are situations, like I said before, where sometimes the session would be cancelled there and then because she couldn't even cope with online, and that's a whole other thing. But I still think that's a better version of tuition than going in person and having the kind of complications of that and the intimidation I think that can lead to. And it is interesting, like, going back to what Dee said, it is a bit of a learning curve when you're dealing with students online, trying to pick up the nuances in a way you don't have that kind of energy that you get when you're with someone physically in person. So there is a challenge there. But I feel like, because I've done it for so many years now, just worked exclusively online, I feel like I've got to a point where I can pick up on subtleties in a student's face. Like, if they've got the camera on, I can sort of tell, like, if there's something not quite right. And I'll just say to them, I know we're meant to talk about this, but it seems like there's something on your mind. Let's just deal with that first. And then it might be the case we don't talk about anything academic for the whole session, but I'd rather that than them sit there not able to take in anything that I'm talking about.
I remember a blog that you wrote 3 years ago about exactly that, when you noticed that sometimes you can't plow through the material, and that was a revelation for you as a perfectionist.
Yes.
That you thought you were supposed to teach
100%.
55 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's still 100% true for me, what I wrote 3 years ago. This idea that sometimes you have to just completely abandon what you were gonna, and sometimes it's a case of trying to navigate that with the parents as well, which can be challenging, especially, I mean, I'm quite lucky. I've worked with parents who are pretty reasonable and can understand sometimes that is necessary. But on the flip side, there've been some who've been like, where's the homework? And I'm like, your child can't even sit and listen to me for an hour. I'm not going to pile a load of homework on them when they can't actually do what they're doing at school as well. It's trying to navigate that can be tricky.
It's beautiful. Margaret Mary, you've got an example for us.
I've got a couple of examples. I mean,
yes, please.
I do that. What everyone's saying about students with anxiety, I do have one that I work with an organisation, and sometimes he calls off last minute, and it's like, that's okay. That's okay. And we're able to go slow and take our time.
Hold on a second, sorry. So you said organization, and Dee also said that. Does that mean that these are students who are emotional based school non-attenders? Is this an alternative provision funding?
Yes, it's alternative provision. So
Great.
so this kid, I mean, he's doing A level, and to begin with, when we were looking at assignments, he would start calling off the lessons, and I said to support worker, there's a connection between when I try to get him to do the assignment or try to get him even to do a question in the assignment and his attendance. So I'm not going to talk about the assignment at all. We're just going to do chemistry. And now we've got to the point where, I mean, he doesn't have his camera on and he doesn't want the sessions recorded, because I took over from another tutor that he wasn't getting on with. And this other tutor was recording the sessions and was telling him off if he wasn't managing things. And I'm like, this kid has got severe anxiety and he's got responsibility for his little brothers at home as well. So don't do that. So
Don't do that.
when he told me I don't want the sessions recorded, now I record presentations and stuff for students so they can review them again. But absolute respect, if that boy doesn't want those recorded, we don't record them. If he doesn't want to put his camera on, he doesn't put his camera on. But the other situation where I talk
about control, isn't it?
Yeah, and talking about the cameras, I missed the cultural meetings the other week because I kind of wanted to be there. But I'm also aware that some of these Muslim girls that I tutor, I'm aware of this because a friend of mine who teaches in a school that's got a lot of Muslim students in it had talked to some of the girls about it. And they were saying to her that basically, even if they're online, they have to put their hijab on. So if they're online with it, so I'm very conscious if I'm tutoring a Muslim girl. A lot of my Muslim girls, in fact, any of them that I'm tutoring, don't put the cameras on. And I just now I don't ask them. I don't ask them to. If I've got, this is a Muslim family, this is a Muslim girl, she doesn't put a camera on. I don't even put her to the discomfort of asking her. I work on the assumption you're at home, you don't want to be putting your hijab on because it's a lot of faff and a lot of hassle just to appear in front of the camera. So fine. I'm not even going to ask you. I'm going to work with you without the camera on. And it's so smooth and so natural that they don't have to explain it to me. And I mean, to be honest, I don't really know, is that the reason they're not putting the camera on? But I don't pressure it. I don't pressure it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there. And I love what you're saying about, just empathizing with them and, sparing them the faff.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really insightful and kind. And that kindness will come across to them, exactly as Rosanna's saying, just not even asking at a certain point becomes the kindness because you're not making them uncomfortable. And I do think it's the faff of covering your hair. I think it's also a discomfort around being visible, that might sort of go along with that we could possibly unpack another time. You said you had 2 students. Was there another one that you wanted to mention?
I was thinking about my boy who has this anxiety, and then I was thinking about one particular Muslim student that I've had for a while. I think she's the only one I've got in my books at the moment. She's not the only one I've had, but she's the only one. No, there was another one who's just finished with me. She's got her little boost that she needed. So I've had a couple of Muslim girls this year, and I was thinking of those in particular. I'm not necessarily asking them to put the cameras on. So to me, that's a particular instance of a special need, but it's a cultural, religious, everything need that to respect, really.
Yeah, it's about inclusion, and it's about being able to be adaptable to be inclusive. Jenna, go for it.
For me, I think there's kind of a number of aspects that have really made it work for my students, and is why, even though I have various challenges with it myself, it works. And it's something that I'm keeping online learning as part of my practice going forwards. Is it gives students extra time with me in a really informal way. I've mentioned this before, but I do see every single student way more than I did when I was just doing like that tutoring approach of being in person solely, because we do body doubling on like most of the rest of the days of the week to do homework together, to do art together, and just to be there and troubleshoot. And I have found that that has really, really made a huge difference for my
Hold on.
students.
Sorry, body doubling and troubleshooting are very purposeful phrases. Is there part of it that's simply just keeping each other company?
Yeah. And it's that being a solid base of reassurance that,
Yeah.
you know, I have no idea how to, like, this piece of homework is really overwhelming and I feel like shit. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And just remind them, even if you have gone through that in your lesson together, and it's like, for example, essays for one of my students last year was the biggest turnaround, and it was genuinely something that would cause panic attacks, and it wouldn't matter how much work we had done in sessions together to break these down into really manageable steps and small nuggets. The thing that made the difference was the moment we started just being online together. I would do my things and just be here, and they could say, and I could say, okay, you look like you're zoning out, or you look like you're really worried. Where are you at? Or they can ask again, and have that reiterated, or to be prompted with something different, and to go, you need a break. You are absolutely doing the right thing by taking a break, and all of those sorts of things.
That's really interesting.
And I think there's also part of it that has made it work for me that also works for students is the way that we can use other tools as well. So the way that they use me as a tool slightly differently, it's a bit like a real version of an AI in the way that we've been.
That's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah. I'm thinking about what Georgina's been saying this week about how ChatGPT is reassuring her, and all of a sudden Jenna has turned into Alexa.
It's exactly the same thing, but you've got that human face. And I love it. And like we joke about, like, you know, when you turn off the autism masking completely and you're like Slack robot thing, like it's a joke, a running joke with some of us is like, okay, with me you can turn off your pretending to be human face and just be your robot self. So, you know, I do it too. I turn off that and we just be AI together. It's great. And the other side of it are the other tools. So being able to have the captions, the live captions and things like that, and not have to have it feel weird, to be able to just pull things up a bit more easily without having to have like a device in between us.
Interesting.
And like things like that. And in some ways, there's, especially for one-to-one where you're traveling a lot, you can't have a full whiteboard in every single house, and you certainly can't have a full interactive whiteboard, but that online thing can sometimes bridge that gap. And I use some of the same tools in person that I do online with my students because they're used to it being online and it's less weird. So I've got like a pocket interactive whiteboard and things like that. And there are so many other tools, like you can switch over to dark mode for me as it is, or whatever. And like for the sites that I use and in my own platforms that I've developed, with help, obviously, we've got like a suite of accessibility tools. It means you can personalize it, you can change the font, you can do this and that live. And I think things like that are sometimes really hard to use and really quite othering to use when you're in person, but online it's a little bit more like we can just play around with these things. And I really love that bridge. And I think one of the reasons why I keep this hybrid model, in that if I have a student that's online, I'm never going to be solely online. If I have a young person that's in person, unless it's through a different AP, for example, an alternative provision, I am never going to be solely in person. We're always going to have that balance so that we can use loads of different tools, so that we can change our relationship, because it's that lots of different things that build a really strong relationship. And getting those snippets into young people's lives in between sessions, it's so important for that relationship building, and it genuinely has transformed so many young people's experiences of education for me.
So beautiful. And what you're communicating here is like, it comes with the sense of ease along with it, you know, that's really clearly very, very deeply thought through. But it's remarkable. It's remarkable. It's so it's so hybrid, this phrase that you used about othering, where, going into using accessibility tools in person can be othering. I have one child who was wearing earplugs and a chew toy in school, which is really othering, Tutoring is really othering.
And it's like the thing that makes it othering as well isn't just that you're someone who's using those tools or needs those tools. It's also that there's such a high threshold to be allowed to use those tools and other people can't use them. And it's like made into this really big thing.
Yes. And simply, it's like maths manipulatives in the classroom. Everyone should have hands-on maths tools, not just the low ability table in the corner next to the TA.
Exactly.
It should be everywhere. Inclusive practice should be everywhere. And what's interesting is you're saying it's so much closer online. The dark mode example is just so simple, isn't it? Why wouldn't you always be able to use that? One of mine doesn't write a text, he dictates it. Brilliant. Why not? Margaret Mary, I'm really intrigued because I said to you, do you have a student? And you came with one. Then you were like, no, I've got two. And now you're popping me in the chat that you've got more. And isn't it interesting that you're noticing them slowly, because online it sort of becomes less of an issue. Tell us about your other students.
Yeah, I find that quite interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, hang on a minute, wait a minute. And I just, because this is just, it, for want of a better word, and it's ordinary. I take this so much for granted that this is this student, who I work with, and I work with him the way he needs to be worked with. So he's blind, he's registered blind, he's doing A-level chemistry. And then one of the biggest things for me in this, so that sounds like, how do you tutor someone who's blind online A-level chemistry? That is quite a challenge. But
how do you tutor somebody who's blind in person on level chemistry?
Exactly. But one of the things for me has been, I mean, doing it online is actually really, really helpful, because you can make everything big instantly.
So it's visual impairment.
Yeah, but he is registered blind, so I don't know. I think he can see, but it's very, very limited. But of course I can record. He can put the presentation. He's got it on a big television set, so it is big. So I can record it so he can hear it. I think the biggest thing to working with him is for me to not be awkward about it, to not worry about hurting his feelings or putting my foot in it or being politically incorrect. And because I became aware of how much I use, can you see? Do you see? In terms of, do you understand? It's like, whoa, Maggie Mary. Because I like things visual. So for me, that has been quite a challenge. But it's also to be able to ask him, how did he do this with you in school? What happens in school? And to be able to address other things that I don't have to with other students. So he has a scribe. So one of the things I had to work consciously with him on is, you need to be able to communicate with the scribe, because it takes them too long to do any tests. So we're working on that. So it's like, okay, what you've got your answer. And he rambles, he talks in full sentences, he's very polite, and I say, think bullet points, because that person has got to write what you're saying. And so in the lesson, he speaks his answer. So I read the question out to him, the explain questions. He speaks it out and I write it. And I do actually say to him, I'm being your scribe now. And then I go, I'm being your chemistry tutor now.
Wow.
So it's not just about the chemistry tuition, it's about how you actually manage And being a teacher in school, we don't have that level. We don't have that level of input, and I don't even think the TAs might have that level of input with one kid. There isn't the time. There isn't the energy. But we're doing that. The other thing is the calculator. His maths is brilliant, but he tries to do all these calculations, working out. He's got a huge whiteboard that he does, and sometimes I say, move out the way, and I take a snip of his whiteboard from the camera. And he does all this maths by hand. But then I've had to say, we need to talk about how you're doing the maths. Nothing wrong with his maths. I'm not criticising him, because he can't do logs. Can't do logs in his head, and he needs to be able to do logs for A-level chemistry. So then we're working out, he's doing calculations on a calculator, which is a talking calculator on his iPad. And it's like, he's not getting the calculations right. And I'm like, I've had to figure out, I basically had to go and buy the same app as him. I don't normally use an iPad for tutoring, but I had to buy the same calculator app just so I can figure out how you input the numbers to get it to do the calculation right. Because not like other calculators, it's like, how do you put in orders of magnitude? Which order do you put the number in first and then press log, or do you press log and then put the number in? Because different calculators do that differently. So just like there's a whole level of practicalities that, as someone who is very visual in what they do, having to deal with not having that, it's been such a learning curve for me. And and his grades are improving, but I do have to ask, how did the school do this? And think about, if he's got to plot a graph, how do you do that in school? How do they facilitate that for you in school? And to just say to his mum as well, ask the special needs department about this. So one thing I suggested was, what about a reading pen? Can he get a reading pen? Would that help him? So just all of that was just like, I would never have imagined, but for me, it's about not being afraid to have that conversation with them, and not to be afraid of that sense of awkwardness, because I think we don't speak about things because we're afraid of putting our foot in it, or of being politically incorrect around disabilities. I think we're afraid of doing that. And that's one thing I've had to be here, is like, I mustn't be afraid of this. I need to, in order to help him, I need to ask those questions that might seem impolite, but I'm going to ask them anyway.
Isn't it lovely, the balance between not asking about putting your camera on with the Muslim girls, and yes, asking what it is that you need with the visually impaired boy, because in both cases, you're in service of what that young person needs.
It's all about them. It is all about what their needs are.
Isn't that stunning? Dee, I want to call on you next. No, wait, your sound's gone dodge. Try again.
Doodah's off.
Hello. Doodah's now on. Go on, somebody say it. You know you want to. No, still off. Doodah's off. Oh, doodah.
No. Right. So the following on from just what Margaret Mary said about asking, what do you need? And it isn't just about students who have, obvious needs like that. We should always be asking that question. What do you need? And helping them become, perhaps they've never been asked that question, and making them become aware that actually, what are my needs? And that perhaps they know, but maybe they're not able to.
So what is it about online that gives us more ability to ask and answer that question?
I don't know. But the other thing I wanted to say was, Margaret Mary's talking about kind of the training the student how to talk in bullet points. Well, we do that all the time with our students if we're making them into effective assessment practitioners by teaching them exam techniques, how to read a question properly, how to develop routines, which means that in a quite a long mathematical question, they aren't just leaving it till the end to check whether it's all okay. They are making those conscious decisions to check for transcription errors, checking for is
Again,
this appropriate.
Again,
All
the
that
word conscious, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so much about just being more aware, more intentional, blending with intention, making decisions on how we work, when we work, how many hours we work, based on our needs and our students' needs. Jenna, I think you're going to have the last say here. Go on.
I think there's a few things here. The thing from the beginning that my internet decided to not play with me for is one of the things that I found challenging for me teaching online is work-life balance. I find it a lot harder. I'm working more, I'm doing more, and I don't get quite the same brain breaks and time breaks and life breaks that I did when I was solely in person. And that can be intrusive. Sometimes it's hard to keep the same boundaries because you can turn up half dressed. You can turn up if everyone's got their cameras off and you as the teacher also has your camera off, you might still be in bed. You know, I have done my really quick 5-minute check-ins while still in bed when the students are more morning people than I am, and it's a really quick stand-up. But also it gives them an insight into my life a little bit more as well and see me as a person. And I think it's really interesting talking about the things that are different with inclusion online than in person. And this is something that I've thought about a lot, because teaching online, working online with young people has improved my in-person practice, because I've looked into some of the research behind some of this, and we have this idea of anonymity on the internet, right? And this idea where the internet trolls come from, and there are elements of that blur that you find online, even in these lessons where it is really, really personal and you know the person, you still have that little bit of reduction in barriers so often that can make it feel more okay to say these things. It's less personal. It's a bit more like that it's just someone in my phone, it's just another person on the internet that just knows me. It's that like AI thing that we've been talking about as well a little bit. It feels like that sometimes, but that's also partly why I break that by going and seeing my students in person, even if we're doing primarily online. But also I think that there's an element of expectation that these things, like, it's always easier to say these things online because, you know, these are internet things to say, they're not teaching things to say. And for me, it has made me way more deliberate, way more active and intentional about how I use the same tools, the same questions in person, and the way that we talk about it and how we break down those barriers in person. So for me, one of the things that I do is we have doodle paper and I will brainstorm. And I know, Julie, you have seen me do this because I did it at QT at BET last year. I will sit there and I will do my word clouds. And we do that in lessons to take away some of that barrier, and we will doodle the heck out of it. We'll have all the art materials out. As we're talking about and asking these challenging questions, we take away that intensity that sometimes happen with that one-to-one in person, especially in your home. And it's been really, really respectful, and that the cognitive and mental boundaries and differences, the different headspaces online, you know, you can get in your headspace, it's a different space, even if you're in your bedroom. If you have your tutor coming into your bedroom or into your living room where you live, it's not your school space, it's not your working hard space, it is your switch off space. That can be really hard, and there's another barrier there. And I think acknowledging that and working with that and communicating really deliberately about it and working with your young person, how can we make this feel like not school? Because it isn't school, but still get and achieve the things that you want to achieve. If we're doing your homework and the things that are attached to school or formal things, how do we still make it your safe space?
Beautiful.
What can we do? Is it that we have a specific notebooks? Is it that we have specific, we call them frems, like little my dragon that we've met previously, and all sorts of things. And I have a library of friends that we use for these things to be like, these are our learning buddies, a bit like desk pets and things like that, and we make them sometimes. And I think that one of the things that I have ended up doing is I design, as one of my side gigs, is I design portable learning spaces where you've got like that artist box that portable easel type vibe for your portable learning space that gets you in that headspace as an adult working, like your work from home space or whatever, so that you can work in different places and be in that right headspace. And I think that there are so many types, and there's some really interesting research that has gone into what makes these questions okay and easier online, and how is that different from internet trolling. And I found it fascinating, honestly.
I find you fascinating. I've just put in the chat that you drop gems in every sentence. I'm so grateful to you for everything that you bring to our dialogue. I'm going to wrap up now, but I'm actually going to ask you each to reflect back something that we've been having a really lovely conversation in the chat throughout all of this, which is one of the things that I love about online, because it's not called interruption. It's like layering the conversation, right? Each of you has said something really profound about the benefit of these conversations. Could I just go around and ask you each to see if you can just encapsulate what these QT conversations bring to you, please? Would that be all right? Yes. Do you go first?
So these conversations specifically?
Yes.
It's community, helping to battle my imposter syndrome.
Oh, interesting. Rosanna?
I'd say relatability. Just kind of when people speak, it sometimes sounds like I'm speaking, because we all just have so many similar experiences, and it's just really nice that can be really relatable and make you feel less lonely.
Agreed. Jenna?
Uninhibited. And my main takeaway today is I think I'm going to just start posting some of the research that I read into the groups.
Please do. I think we should have a Jenna channel. Margaret Mary, go for it.
I find them quite stimulating, and for me, who doesn't get out and about, I actually find I don't feel so alone. I think that's important. I don't feel alone doing this, which I can do if I haven't connected for a while.
Absolutely right. For me, it's definitely the highlight of my working week. And that's because we're pushing the thinking forward together, and watching each of you develop, reflecting back on Rosanna's blog from 3 years ago, it gives me such joy, because this is a shared journey that we're on together. And Jenna, I hope you don't mind my saying, you show up so differently in these sessions now than you did 3 months ago. And that sense of safety just comes across in everything. So I really appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. Bye, Dee. Bye, Marg.